Welcome to Empowering Innovators, the YouTube series where we'll talk about innovation the startup way. Today I have with me Misha de Sterke, Senior Partner at Innoleaps and author of the 10x Growth Machine, which is all about how corporates innovate in the startup way. Welcome, Misha. So Misha, in your book, but also in the way when we talk to corporate partners, you often say it's either grow or die. Can you explain what you mean with that sentence?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, what we basically see working with clients is that at one point the existing services or products that they have in their portfolio, they reach a certain saturation, so that consumer needs are changing. And is our current portfolio of products and services still matching those needs? So if that's not the case, you will lose connection with the market. And to find new growth opportunities again, you need to think beyond your existing portfolio of products and services.
So how does that relate to growing or dying? Meaning that you need to keep on innovating and looking what your customer needs are in order to create future growth? Is that?
Look, absolutely. If you don't adjust and reinvent your existing portfolio of products and services and also build new types of business models, if you don't do that, you will die at one point. And I think we all know the cliche stories about all the companies, Kodak, and that's happening. That's happening faster than ever.
And how do you see that leaders of large corporations, CEOs, CIOs, CFOs are dealing with these challenges that they have? Because they have a daily operation to run, but on the same time they need to reinvent themselves. How are they dealing with this? Is this challenging for them, or do you?
Yeah, look, I think it's sort of known as what we talk about, how can you at the same time execute your business and also at the same time reinvent or create new businesses? And there's a big tension between the two because, let's be pragmatically, a day has a certain amount of hours and you see that most time and resources of the leaders, but also of these companies, go to their core business because they make their money now.
Right.
But how do you then actually go with the same type of people, at the same time you have also invent new businesses? So there's a big tension in between those two.
So how do you organize that? You talk about and we talk about dual core and growing beyond your core. Can you explain those two expressions? What does dual core mean and what does growing beyond your core mean?
Yeah, so basically this whole dual core approach is developed. So first of all, that there is an understanding that executing your business is something different than searching or inventing new business. That's two different planets, right? So you have more entrepreneurial people that are from their nature more thinking about which consumer pain point or problem can we solve, what type of business do we need to create. Then that's a very different mindset and tool set than, let's say, running a large business, which is also a profession, but these are not the same. So that's where I start with, to understand there is a difference between these two, a very big difference. So that whole dual core approach is like, look, we have the core business which we need to execute, no mistakes, efficient, at scale, but at the same time we also need to have a different system, let's say, that runs these new ideas from idea to scale with different people, a different process and different metrics. And that's let's say the dual core.
Is that like
idea.
A second core then?
Yeah, you can see that. So there are some confusions about what does it actually mean. You can see it as a second system. But at the same time, you have different types of innovation, right? So if you have a core business innovation, the business should be responsible to bring that to a certain maturity. For example, efficiency innovations, right? You need to run your business faster and cheaper.
Yeah.
But if you come in that strange realm of new business models, or can we create a product with a different service, which is more away from their core business, then you need to have, let's say, that protected area where people can work with different tools like rapid prototyping, right, and methodologies to learn from the market and from the customer very fast. And we also need a different metric system. So you need to protect it, put it away depending on the type of innovation, but also manage the integration between the two. Because if we would launch a new service for a certain business unit, which is sort of related to what they do now, you cannot do that completely isolated, so you need to bring them in.
Yeah. So you don't believe in setting things fully apart, where in the past you had all kind of companies like Philips that had their own innovation lab with a lot of scientists doing new things. You have R&D. How do you see that then? Is that what you call with a second core, or is this more related to business model innovation or other ways of innovating with other kind of more entrepreneurial kind of spirits and methodologies? Or?
I would say that separate entity, I believe in it, as long as it is focused on more disruptive innovations, different types of business models, let's say completely different businesses than they run today.
Yeah.
Then you should separate it completely, and at one time think, look, can we have access to resources from our company, right? Brands or smart people, IP, legal advice.
Yeah.
So they have all this in place, but how can we use this knowledge to then also build?
So it's still loosely connected maybe to the core, leveraging what you have, but not let the core slow you down with the new innovations that you're working on.
And that's sort of the thing that you need to manage, because at one point, till what maturity phase do you bring this innovation or business? Because if you do it too early and you invite all these people already in, they maybe ask questions that are not really relevant at that stage of the business, right? Yeah. For example, if you start a new company, you know that you cannot make big numbers in the beginning. It's always start small. So starting small is something very different for large corporation executives, because they are used to very big numbers. So if we come up with a fantastic idea and we show these small numbers, these people are not getting excited too easily.
So how do you deal with that then?
Look, I think that's why at one point you need to, especially with disruptive ventures, so new business models, you need to bring it to a maturity point that the business would say, wow, this is a very interesting opportunity, maybe I would even like to invest in it. And how do you do that is basically that you need to have an end-to-end process that makes it very objective and transparent of how the venture is proceeding from idea to scale. And at one point that the team can also tell you as an executive, look, this is the product that we have launched, this is the customer segment, this is the size of the customer segment, and we know that week over week we can grow. We can grow customers, we can grow maybe our order size, and then people get, okay, it becomes more predictable, it's a big opportunity. So that's...
Let's start at the starting point of that process. Does it start with defining your innovation strategy, maybe on senior level? Can you explain a little, and then that boils down to different steps from the ideation to the validation to... Can you explain a little bit what the starting point is? Is that at C level? Is that at business unit level? Where do you start?
Look, so ideally you start at the senior level, the C level, to understand where can we grow? Where can we grow our revenues, basically? It's a very simple question, and most of the time there is a growth gap, right? So we have our estimated earnings from our current business. Now, certain things are already declining, so there is a gap between the ambition and what is actually now going and what is then estimated to be the growth. So there's a gap, and that gap needs to be filled. And then sometimes an innovation person is sort of, here's the gap, and let's try to fix it. But it's very important that you have a revenue number, a growth gap as a goal, because that determines on identifying areas where you would like to place your bets that can actually bring up that big number. So as a big company, most of the areas don't really make sense because they cannot reach a certain growth size, right? So there it already starts. So it starts with what kind of revenue numbers do we need to achieve? What is then the areas of interest where we can invest, but we can also leverage our capabilities, brands.
Are these
people.
normally tied with the strategic angles of the company, or could they be beyond their strategic? If they go, if you look at how Google invests, for example, they go very far beyond their core, which was in the past, was mostly, online optimization, search, all that stuff, marketing, sales, So now they go into all kind of different directions. How does that, if you work with a company, for example, in FMCG, do they look primarily at their core business then, or does it also go beyond their core? And what's the definition then for beyond the core in such an industry?
Good point. So, look, I think in essence you see that they focus very much on their core business and how can we, extend the core business life cycle, maybe optimize margins, which makes a lot of sense, which we also need to work on. But then still at the same time, where do we make money in 10 years, right? Depending, and the idea that the world is constantly changing, especially when you see all these technologies and consumer shifts, and now also COVID, which accelerated a couple of trends from a consumer perspective, we can definitely say the world is not the same in 10 years. No. So how do we make money then? So that basically means that we need to let go our current perspective and think from the future back. And that is something, of course, pretty challenging because you're running your day-to-day operation and somebody asks you, hey, how can we make money in 10 years? Well, I don't know. Help me,
And 10 years feels far away. The world might not even be very different in 3 years, right?
It feels like a faraway term, and that's why at some point you try to, because how can you know that you think in a 10 years perspective? We don't know. No. So we sort of need to make it realistic, and that's why you put a growth number. And then you think about, look, if you in the FMCG world, you can think about convenience, affordable nutrition, all kinds of plant-based proteins, right? So a lot of things are going on from a consumer trend perspective, but also from a technology product perspective. And then basically, can we determine what are the areas where we can invest in? And we don't know if it will be successful, and that makes it, of course, even more challenging, but we do know that we need to think about a longer time horizon.
And where do you get these ideas? I mean, how do we challenge, those C-level industry leaders of large corporations on where the next big idea or where the new business model might come from? I mean, do you look at what is already happening there outside in the world, at what startups and scale-ups are doing? Do you look at consumer trends? Do you look at where VCs are investing? How do you deal with that process to create that new portfolio of services, products, new business models?
A couple of things that you can do is you look at the outside of the market, like for example startups and scale-ups, people that are working on new business models, new technology. I think we can learn a lot from these young companies. On the other side, it's also very interesting to interview your own customers that maybe are not customer with your product anymore. So where did they go? What kind of alternative do they use now? I mean, retail, it's a moment of time that retail is fading out. Who thinks that retail still exists in 10 years? I don't know, because HelloFresh and all these competitors are entering the market. And it's all about convenience, less hassle, for a good affordable price. So it's again, understanding your existing customer base. Where did they left? Why did they left actually your product? And what is now the alternative? Patents is another one. Filed patents, just easy to access, and what type of technology patents are out there. And I think what is very interesting to follow is where does the money go investment-wise. So having conversations with investors. I think the VC market gives you a good understanding of where now all the money is going. That gives you an indication of what might become big, right? So a couple of things there.